We are hello and welcome. We are excited to be talking to the newly elected president of the Baltimore City Council, Zeke Cohen. We're going to have a slightly shorter conversation today, but we are so appreciative of his coming on. He has a very impressive record of visionary legislation and constituent services, but right now we want to talk about the right now. And Zeke, let's start off. You were my councilman. You did a wonderful job, and now you're looking at the whole city. What are you've always been looking at the larger picture and what you can do. How are you going to move forward in this political reality?
Yeah. First off, thanks for having me on, Jacob and Barry. Look, it is absolutely a moment of challenge and a moment of opportunity for the city of Baltimore, right? I think we are clear and clear-eyed about what this administration in Washington, D.C. is doing to cities like Baltimore. When we think about, I was just at the port at Trade Point Atlantic this morning. When we think about the horrific impacts that these tariffs are having on our import-export industry in the city, when we think about the massive amount of money that our meds and eds have lost due to shifts in how the NIH reimburses for indirect costs. I think Johns Hopkins, they said the number was $800 million lost at this point. University of Maryland Medical System, similarly crazy numbers. Reality is that Baltimore also has a lot of federal workers that live here, right? Folks that live in our city, commute to Washington, D.C., and so many of those jobs are lost, and that economy is ruined. Not to mention, what we've seen in terms of the immigration policies, which we know are only just ramping up, right? I mean, they were using the Fallon building here in Baltimore as essentially a sort of extrajudicial holding cell for people. They would have them here. They have them here for 8, 9, 10 days when they are being detained and then ultimately deported. But again, Barry knows this because we live in Southeast Baltimore. This city has always been home to immigrants and to refugees and to people from all over the world, whether that's Greek folks in Greektown or Italians in Little Italy, or over the last 15 years, our Central American community in Highlandtown, in Upper Fells Point, our Honduran, Guatemalan, Salvadoran, Venezuelan, and it's a blessing, right? I mean, contrary to what the president says, it's actually been the folks who have come here have rebuilt our city, and have stabilized parts of our city that otherwise were experiencing enormous out-migration. So it is a very challenging moment. We were talking today earlier about the budget and some of the downward pressures that are going to be on the city of Baltimore as we consider the impact of tariffs, as we consider the very difficult session in Annapolis that just concluded last night, where a lot of like teacher pension costs are being shifted onto the city, and so it's a challenging moment that we're in. But I also think it's a moment of opportunity, and the way that I see it is Baltimore actually can model stability, which is not something we've always done, and demonstrate that multiracial democracy can still work, even as we see the incursion of a autocratic or semi-authoritarian, semi-fascist state out of our leadership in Washington, D.C., that we can be a place where whether you're Black, whether you're trans, whether you're Jewish, whether you're gay, whether you're immigrant, whether you're whatever you are, we want you here. And this is a welcoming city, and we actually thrive in part because of our diversity. And, I put this up. I was at the protest on Saturday, and I put this up on Twitter, and Barry will appreciate this. My trolls went absolutely nuts because I said something about, we are thriving not in spite of, but because of our diversity. And I talked about how Baltimore is seeing some of the sharpest declines in violent crime of any city in America right now. We are seeing
Mhm.
a precipitous drop in our homicide rate. And we're actually seeing for the first time this year, our population trend in the right direction. We saw some growth in population. So while there are enormous challenges banging on our door, I also think the ability for our city to remain interconnected, the toughness, the grit, the creativity, the compassion, the just warmth and will to do better that Baltimore presents, I actually think presents a real opportunity for us right now. And so that's where my focus is. I feel like hope, we need to remain optimistic and hopeful. And I'm seeing it. I mean, I see communities coming together in ways that I did not think possible. And I think there is an energy and a vibrance in the city of Baltimore right now that I'm just thrilled to, and honored and humbled to get to be able to lead in this moment, even with the very real challenges that are in front of us.
Not to
Yeah.
mention
So
there's
I wanted to
outstanding
ask
food.
you.
I was
Hmm.
gonna say, not to mention the amazing food.
Yes. Oh, best food city in the country, period.
I wanted to ask you, Zeke. So to on sort of being that inspiration and lesson. Baltimore has a long history, before this moment of having to deal with an antagonistic sort of executive branch. Whether it be previously from our, governor, not this current one, but the previous one, Hogan, turning down huge billions of dollars in funding,
Yeah,
sort of as a poke in the eye to Baltimore,
that's right.
to obviously historic racism and development, in the area. What sort of lessons, as we're taking a look at that from a city that has remained and is growing in that resilience, what lessons can other areas of the country take a look at that aren't necessarily as experienced with having that sort of antagonistic relationship?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it's a good point because, right, I mean, even during Trump's first administration, I'll never forget when he said we were a rat-filled s-hole, and
Hmm.
and then to your point, Jacob, the death of the red line under Larry Hogan, our previous governor, who thankfully is not our senator and hopefully will never be in elective office in the state of Maryland again. Yeah, it's really that was a devastating blow to our city and to our region, and frankly to the entire state of Maryland, and just really unfortunate. It is, I will say, it is a breath of fresh air to have Wes Moore as our governor, someone who is cheering for Baltimore and understands our importance to the state and to the region, and that we are the economic engine of Maryland, that we, and does not just kick us every time, but is actually investing in our housing and investing in transportation. So I will say it is really night and day. Look, I think there's a couple lessons for other cities, which is, and I think this is really a lesson that we too need to sort of take heed right now is, look, you got to have a diversified economy. I think we're seeing right now that feds, eds, and meds is a real challenge. We are heavily reliant on the federal government. We're heavily reliant on educational institutions that have gotten pretty rocked, and then hospitals. And God forbid if they really go after Medicaid, we're going to be in trouble in the state of Maryland and in Baltimore City. But I think that's why, to Barry's point, like it's so good to see, our restaurant community, our food community really stepping up, and just the cultural creativity that we have in our city, right? I mean, doubling down on the institutions. Like I was at the Baltimore Museum of Art the other night, and they were doing this really unique portrait exhibit that Senator McCrae helped to organize around community heroes, and they were honoring folks like Rita Cruz and Bel Air Edison and different people who are not politicians, who are not like, roll off your tongue, you know, civic leaders, but who do an enormous amount of good in their communities. And I think that is what Baltimore has in spades. Is there is so much civic pulse and participation in this city, at the community level, at the neighborhood level. So I think that's a really important ingredient. And then again, having a diversified economy. I mean, being at the port this morning and, you know, uh, seeing the tremendous growth that's happened at Trade Point Atlantic in these last couple of years. I got to represent District 1, which is Southeast Baltimore. So about a third of the port of Maryland was in my district. And that's just been extraordinary. But again, our culinary scene, our creative scene, our hospitality scene, and then I do think that having solid, stable leadership really matters. Like Brandon Scott getting a second term really makes a difference. Like just in terms of how people think about our ability to be stable and to not be spiraling on some crazy corruption scandal or plummeting into 376 homicides in a year. I mean, having a mayor who is stable, having a state's attorney that is solid, having a comptroller, having a governor that cheers for us instead of beats on us. Leadership matters. And that's why I'm, again, enormously humbled and grateful to have the job that I have, is like being a part of this cadre of, uh, you know, smart, progressive, pragmatic, young. I don't say younger. I don't want to be ageist, but there's just an energy and a stability, I think, at our leadership right now that I think means that we can do some other things instead of going from crisis to crisis.
I want to just ask as well on the topic of sort of mayors and city councils. One thing that Baltimore I think is also interesting in is they had for a long time a strong mayor,
Yeah.
right? Sort of setup. And recently, you've actually been a part of the process of sort of unwinding some of that centralized executive authority and bringing it back to sort of legislative and back more towards representatives. And I'm wondering if you could talk at all about sort of that process and maybe what we can, because I'm sure a lot of people are thinking about how would we potentially start to unwind some of the concentration of run amok executive authority.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, this is not a critique in any way of Brandon Scott because he's my colleague and my friend, and I respect him enormously. But I do think, to your point, Jacob, there has been, we are a very, very executive heavy city in terms of the structure of governance in Baltimore. The prime example being our Board of Estimates, which is where all financial dealings, all contracts have to come through. And folks that pay attention to Baltimore politics know that the mayor either is or appoints 3 out of the 5 seats on the Board of Estimates. So essentially, the mayor is the Board of Estimates, right? Like there is nothing that I or the comptroller, who are the other 2 citywide elected officials that also sit on the board, can do without the mayor ultimately blessing it, right? We are 2 votes, he's got 3. I would say that's not a particularly healthy balance of power in a small d democratic system. Where we have made some, and I'll just say on that, I think there are some very fluid conversations right now about how to make a more equal, co-equal governance structure in the city. Right, we have done some things within our charter for example, it used to be that we could only cut money from the city budget. Now, due to a charter amendment, we can actually reallocate money. So if I cut $500,000 from DPW, I could put it into DOT as long as I get my colleagues to sign off. We lowered the veto threshold. It used to take 12 votes to override the mayor's veto. Now it only takes 10. 10 is still a lot, but 10 out of 14 or 15, counting me, but it's lower than 12. And so there has been some chipping away at the strong mayor, strong executive system. Look, I'll make no mistake. I would like to see an even more equal, co-equal governance structure. I said that at my first Board of Estimates meeting. I said, look, enormous respect for our mayor, and we are a co-equal branch of government. We're the legislature.
I think that the current environment shows why, the individual is good individuals can sometimes obscure problematic systems that only really get exposed when very problematic people come into play. We're seeing that at the federal level. And so even if the mayor is wonderful and his heart is in all the right places, just that structure can lead to some
I think that's right. I mean, look, they say power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And maybe not, but I definitely think we have seen a lot of corruption within our system. Again, not with this mayor, but in the not too distant past, we have seen a lot of corruption, some of it having to do with the Board of Estimates and just that heavy concentration of power that exists there. And so, again, I do think as the presiding officer, as the leader of the legislative branch, having a more co-equal power sharing, I actually think is good, not just for for me as the city council president. I actually think it's good for the people, and even I would say for the mayor himself to have. I think one of the things that's not super healthy in Baltimore, and I think to your point, Jacob, that we're like seeing right now with Trump is, there is this like training of the media. Everything is the mayor. Like if someone dies, it's the mayor's fault. If something good happens, it's everything is about the mayor. And we know that in reality, one person can't control everything, and something tragic happens, the Key Bridge falls down, the someone hacks into our system, there's a cyber attack, right? While we all want to blame the mayor can only do but so much. And so having a more distributed power sharing agreement, I actually think would give the mayor a little bit more cover. But again, I'm not the mayor, so who knows?
Zeke, real quickly, I was very encouraged by the election in November. There was a lot of outside money coming from Baltimore County, coming from the person who bought the Sun only to the newspaper, coming from his nephew, and every candidate that they supported lost. And their charter amendment to reduce the size of the council lost. And I mean, I just think that's, and your opponent had some of that money, and you won without looking backwards. I mean, it was.
Yeah, and look, I think that I'll speak specifically to question H, which is the ballot question that you're referencing, where they would have cut the city council in half. Folks didn't want that, and I think what was beautiful about the campaign that we ran, and that we were ultimately successful, is that was the first time in, I want to say, like 20 years or something, that a ballot measure had failed. These things, I think the assumption is you get them on the ballot and they just fly through because people don't pay attention. And I get that because sometimes I go into the ballot box and I'm like, man, it's like 15 different questions, and I got like some bond issues, and and I'm just trying to vote for myself or Brandon, and or whoever, and now I got to read all these questions. So I get the theory and sort of the fatigue that people can have, but what I thought was beautiful about that campaign is that I think it showed that Baltimoreans are sophisticated and people pay attention in ways that you would not necessarily always give us credit for. And when it comes to our representation, people were like, no, thank you. We are not interested in cutting our city council in half. We want to, when we're mad, we want to be able to yell at Zeke, and we want to be able to yell at Mark Parker, and we want to be able to yell at Danny McCray and Ryan Dorsey and all these people. And like, I just thought that was, I think, to sort of the overall point that we're making here, and just the the sort of creep of authoritarianism that we're seeing in our national politics right now. I thought it was a beautiful moment that the voters in this city so decisively, like not a close one, rejected that ballot initiative and said, we're good. We like the folks we got. And if we don't like them, we're going to vote them out. But that's our choice. That is not your choice. We believe in small d democratic representation in this town. And, again, that's one of the many reasons why I feel extremely hopeful in this moment is like Baltimore in all of its uh, with all the many quirks and challenges that we have, I think is ready to show the world that multiracial democracy still works, and you don't have to demonize immigrants or trans people or the Jews or whatever the group you want to pick, that actually we function better as a city, as a society, when we're connected with each other. And I think that's what the mayor and the entire 14-person crew that I get to roll around with, that's what we are dead set on showing the world.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I know that we've already kept you over time here, so I really want to thank you so much for joining us. And that's an amazing pro-democracy way to to bid out. Unless you have any final thoughts.
No, just thank you. This was great. I really appreciate the dialogue, and thank you for just elevating important issues. I get to sometimes go on TV or radio, but I really like this kind of longer form conversational approach. I think we need it. I mean, there's a lot of conversation about who's going to be the Joe Rogan of the left, and I don't know if it's you all, but we definitely need platforms where we're able to exchange ideas and have healthy dialogue within a democracy. I think that is one of the things that is going to save us in this very, very challenging moment that we find ourselves in. So really appreciate you all.
Thanks so much for joining us, Steve. Really appreciate you. So thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. Really found it interesting, especially Barry.
I'm back.
Him sort of talking, about how, when sort of given the option, how pro democracy, small d democracy, people both are in the city. And, when we look at the polling and we talk about it, people in general are very pro small d democracy. And so I think that there's a lot of lessons that we can learn, from Baltimore. Um, for the larger country, for the larger country.
So my internet froze and I was kicked off. So I missed Zeke leaving and what you said, but I assume you were complimenting. It was a great conversation.
Totally.
And did you stress about how important local elections are?
We talked about local elections, but we didn't stress it there at the end. So yeah, it is a good point though, as to how, both from the ability of an individual to have an outsized impact actually engaging at that level, but also, as Zeke was talking about throughout his whole conversation, about the impact and the immediacy of impact that and responsiveness that local government has in a way that makes democracy and government, real in a way that it becomes very abstract sometimes at the federal level. The sort of crashing of the economy in the world notwithstanding at this moment, in general, it can be a bit obscured, how to get in contact with or what the exact actions happening at the top are, whereas you can really feel, the local elections.
And we want to stress, we know that we have allies everywhere throughout the country, and we happen to live here, and we have national activists as allies, and we have other local people, but there is a preponderance of folks from Maryland, and we would love to hear from you from Jacksonville or Boise or any of the Springfields. We would love to know what's going on in your community. And it's very important. There's changes. I mean, what happened on Saturday at the level of people's unhappiness, there could be a lot of changes on the federal level that takes longer. That's an ocean liner that has to turn around. So local and state elections are very, very important. Sheriff, Board of Education. We just saw a judicial election in Wisconsin that had incredible impact and ongoing ramifications. So we just want to stress that when someone like Zeke comes on and is so smart and dedicated and hardworking, I am sure that there are Zekes or the local equivalent where you are, and if there aren't, then run for office.
Absolutely, because right now there is this huge amount of energy, and people, one of the ways to seize it is to run for office or to find the good, people who are already in office and throw in behind them, because they need that support, and we need that outside pressure, right, in order to make sure that even the people who are, they empathize with the cause. They need, part of it is we need to make them do it. We need to give them the external force and power and support so that they can go into those spaces and advocate strongly and fearlessly.
Yes, I thought it was a great conversation. I just want to say personally, he was my councilman for 8 years, and a friend of mine. And we live in an area with a very, very vibrant community, immigrant community, that not only is the food amazing, but they took areas that were in despair. I mean, there's a neighborhood next to mine that used to have what they call a main street, and then in the 50s and maybe the 60s, that's where people went school shopping or grocery shopping, and then the malls came, and then people started going out in to other places, and it died. I mean, the area, immigrants have come in and revitalized that area with all sorts, not just great food, but I mean just clothing stores,
small businesses, vibrancy in terms of the tax base, great, just, and more vibrant communities in and of themselves in general, the people on the ground interacting.
Incredible energy, and that's happening in all places. And I think Zeke said it best, that we need that diversity. We suffer without it.
And that's why, we at DSOT obviously have been, from the very beginning, structured in such a way that this is about representative democracy and about a multicultural supermajority of individuals, right? Because we're rooted in the fact that this cross-pollination, this, joining together in common cause, such a diverse group of people is really it best represents, what America is and what the choices that America wants to make, and it's our path forward towards prosperity and democracy, obviously.
Yes, and we've always said, well, welcome whoever you are, welcome. Just don't shop locally 6 days a week. You know, find roadside stands, find small businesses, find you know, unrepresented businesses, find your neighbors who have stores. Make conscious decisions to shop locally 6 days a week, and then don't make discretionary purchases on Tuesday. And we welcome all of you to come and join us.
Yeah, and so thank you all so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming. Hope that you enjoyed the conversation with Zeke. And until next time, don't shop on Tuesday.